Welcome to my new video series called Introduction to Gabriel Music Notation. I am your host, William Tapley. And in this program, I will explain a new system of transcribing music. At least, it is new for most of the planet. Actually, I invented it 50 years ago. Although Gabriel Notation is primarily for keyboard music, it will eventually supplant all current forms of printed music. So why do I make that bold prediction? Because Gabriel is far superior to our traditional notation system, which was invented more than 1,000 years ago by the Benedictine monk Gabriel Music. Also, I will be introducing my new book, which I am showing you here, and I will show you in a minute. All Keys Are Easy, Volume 1, wherein I describe 15 major advantages which Gabriel Music Notation enjoys over traditional notation. And here is the actual book. Now, since this is the first program in my new series, I will cover the first topic that I talk about in my book, which is the construction of my easy-to-read and easy-to-understand Gabriel staff and how it compares with our traditional staff. A musical staff consists of printed horizontal lines which register notes, as I am sure all of you are familiar with, as well as other instructions from the composer to the performer. Now on your screen is a comparison of the C major scale in the two staffs. On the right in this illustration you see my new Gabriel system, which features bass and treble clefs comprised of 4 lines each, which is 1 line less than the 5-lined traditional clefs as shown at the left in the illustration. In future programs, I will discuss other important features of my invention, such as the many advantages of a 12-tone chromatic scale, and the elimination of all accidental signs, such as sharps, flats, double sharps, double flats, naturals, etc. Now, these radical improvements to Guido d'Arezzo's system are long overdue. And of course, I am not the first to recognize the many problems of traditional music notation. However, for over 1,000 years, musicians have had to make do with its many anomalies. So next, let's compare the 5-lined clefs of traditional notation at the top with the new 4-lined clefs of Gabriel notation at the bottom, as they each register the A major scale. And now let's transfer the illustration of the two staffs to a full screen. Both staffs show the A major scale, which has 3 sharps in its key signature. In the traditional system at the top, the 5 staff lines are spaced equidistant apart, as I am sure all of you are familiar with. In the Gabriel system, the 4 staff lines delineate 2 narrow subdivisions at the top and bottom of the Gabriel staff, which are 1 2/3 note heads apart in vertical separation, while the center section is 2 1/3 note heads apart in vertical separation. Now let's compare how the two notation systems register the C major scales shown at the top and the C sharp major scale shown at the bottom. On the left, we see the 2 scales in traditional notation, and on the right, the 2 scales in Gabriel notation. But notice that the C sharp scale notes in traditional music notation in the bottom left staff fall on the exact same lines and spaces as the C major scale in traditional notation, as printed at the top left. Even though you must remember to play every note 1/2 tone higher than the printed note. By contrast, in Gabriel notation on the right, the notes for the C sharp major scale at the bottom accurately register 1/2 tone higher on the staff than the C major scale at the top. By the way, notice that the black notes indicate black keys and the white notes indicate white keys. There is no way to similarly distinguish black keys from white keys in our traditional notation. And these problems with our current system are well known. and have often been enumerated ever since Guido first developed music notation in the early 11th century. Next, let's look at how these problems crop up in actual printed music. Here we see the first 3 bars of a relatively contemporary piano piece, Chopin's Waltz in C sharp minor, opus 64. In the first 3 bars of this piece, there are 19 notes, but only 3 of them are depicted accurately in traditional notation as shown at the top. 16 of the 19 notes are modified by either the key signature or an accidental. Thus, you hardly ever play what you see. By contrast, Gabriel notation is much simpler and more accurate because all 19 notes register consistently on the Gabriel staff. You don't need to learn 15 different keys, where sometimes the note may be sharp and you must play the note above the printed note, and sometimes the note is flat and you must play the note below the printed note. All 88 keys on an actual full-size keyboard, both black and white, are expressed in Gabriel by one 12-tone chromatic scale. And there's no reason music notation cannot follow this same logical pattern. You should only need to learn 12 note and staff conjunctions in order to read all music. Here we see the C sharp major scale in traditional music notation at the top, and in Gabriel notation at the bottom. In the traditional system, the C sharp major scale uses the same notes as the C major scale, that is, the white keys on a piano. But you must remember to play the key 1/2 tone above instead of the note shown. If the music were written in 7 flats, the printed scale again would utilize the same white keys, but then you would have to remember to play the note 1/2 tone below the note indicated. By contrast, all of the 12 tones in Gabriel's 12-tone chromatic scale, both black and white keys, have their separate unique staff locations. And these unique locations repeat throughout all 88 keys of a keyboard. Now, surprisingly, a truly satisfactory solution for the problems inherent in Guido's system has eluded musicians until now. Here are 4 more of the most serious problems we face with our current musical staff. The equidistant lines and spaces in traditional notation on the left of this next slide may look accurate, and they display a very regular appearance, but they do not correctly express the various half and whole tone intervals, even in the C major scale, which they are supposed to represent, nor for that matter any other scale. By contrast, in Gabriel notation, it's visually obvious that the half-tone intervals between E and F and B and C, for example, are half the vertical distance of the whole tone intervals between other notes in the C major scale. Thus, on the top left, you see the regular but inaccurate C major scale in Guido's system, and on the right, the irregular but accurate C major scale in Gabriel notation. At the bottom left of this slide, notice how the C sharp major scale in traditional notation looks identical to the C major scale on top. The sharp notes are indicated only by the key signature. This confusion is prevalent in our current notation system. There are 15 different key combinations that all use the same printed C major scale. To give a very humble comparison, it would be as if in football, you needed 15 different quarterbacks to run 15 different plays. With Gabriel notation, you only need one quarterback to run all 15 plays. It's time for music to catch up with the very much lesser sport of football. Now notice next what happens if you sharpen each of those notes. In other words, transpose from C major into the key of C sharp major, which has 7 sharps. And each note is raised 1/2 tone. As I said before, the notes on the C sharp major scale stay in the same location in our traditional notation as the C major scale. Thus, a performer must remember to play the note immediately above the printed note, rather than the note which is actually displayed. This is one of the strange anomalies I spoke about before. With Gabriel, the note heads are printed accurately 1/2 tone higher, just as on a keyboard. Notice in addition, the black notes are printed with black, angular, contrasting shaped note heads, again, like the black keys on a keyboard. The two notes that change location, E to F and B to C, are still expressed by white keys and appear white and oval shaped in Gabriel notation, but also incorporate a black dot, which indicates a sharp note that is expressed by a white key. And notice how much page space is saved in Gabriel. When the key signature is depicted as a number, in this case 7, along with a sharp symbol, contrast that with 7 sharp symbols as expressed in the traditional key signature. The purpose of 7 sharp signs in this traditional key signature is to indicate which notes on lines or spaces must be modified. That purpose is no longer necessary in my Gabriel system, since there is only one chromatic scale. Gabriel also saves space by eliminating all accidental signs. No more sharps, flats, double sharps, double flats, or natural signs. All total changes are expressed in the note heads themselves. Now next we come to the third major advantage of the Gabriel staff, and we will be looking at several examples outside the music industry where we will find strings of numbers that are broken up into subdivisions, not unlike the new 4-line staff. Even if the equidistant lines of the current system were accurate, it is difficult to visually distinguish notes on clefs with 5 or more equidistant lines and spaces. And it leads to absurd mantras like "every good boy does fine" and "all cows eat grass," which all of us former keyboard students are well familiar with. You know what I'm talking about. Similar examples of this problem and its solution are credit card numbers and also postal tracking numbers. Those long sets of numbers are broken down into groupings of 4 because the eye can grasp 4 items much more easily and they are easier to memorize. You can be sure they would use 5 or more similar groupings if they were just as easy to read as 4 numbers. And the same principle holds true with staff lines. Guido's original system used 4 lines, but the addition of more scales and accidentals over the years necessitated a larger staff. Now some other notation proposals over the years have tried experimental systems with even larger staffs. But through all this history of confusion, the gold standard for readability for both commercial number sequences and musical staff lines remains at the maximum number of 4. Another difficulty with traditional notation is that note placement is inconsistent from one clef to another, as well as within each clef. In this illustration, the note head for A/A sharp is located on the bottom space and top line of the bass clef, while on the treble clef, A/A sharp is found on the second space from the bottom and on the ledger line above the clef. With Gabriel notation, note placement is consistent from one clef to another as well as within each clef. In the illustration shown, the note head for A sharp always intersects the upper of the 2 lines which are closer together, no matter which clef or register. The advantage of Gabriel's analogous clefs is very clearly demonstrated in the case of octave chords. In the example shown from the beginning of Scott Joplin's The Entertainer, octave notes of the same pitch appear at the same location on the clefs, no matter whether they register in the bass clef or the treble clef or any other clef. So in conclusion, Gabriel Music Notation is far better than traditional notation because the staff is much easier and simpler to read. Now in my next program, I will discuss the advantages of Gabriel's innovative chromatic scale and how the notes intersect with the new 4-line clefs. And if you are interested, I am offering my new book, All Keys Are Easy, which contains 48 pages and 38 illustrations. that describe all 15 advantages of Gabriel Music Notation. If you would like a copy of my new book, All Keys Are Easy, go to my website, thirdeaglemedia.com, and look for the PayPal donation tab. Just click on $21, or you can send a money order for $21 to me, William Tapley, Post Office Box 291, Osage, Iowa, 50461. Now, if you live in Canada, the cost is $36 in US dollars, and those prices do include postage and handling. Now, if you live outside of North America, please write to me at the above-mentioned post office box number for current prices. So in conclusion, thank you all very much for watching this video. And I'll see you in my next program, all about Gabriel Music Notation.